Hey everybody, welcome to the Hey Woman podcast. We're going to get started today by talking a little bit about my Nan. So my Nan took her job as a grandmother very seriously. She instilled in us some basic life skills from a very early age, I would say. It was very important to her that we knew exactly how to pour a beer into a frosty mug. So making sure that the can fit in one go was very important to her.
She certainly did.
It was also very important to her that we had table manners. As you can see, neither one of us is putting our elbows on the table. And that if you were ever out to dinner and you didn't know what fork to use, that you kind of started from the outside and worked your way in. Times at Nan's weren't always about rules and different things like that. We were also allowed to have fun. We could kind of do whatever we wanted as long as we didn't create dust while we were doing it.
No dust. Dust.
Dusting those hurricane lanterns was not an easy thing to do, so you learned very quickly not to do it. She believed that her grandchildren could do anything. There are 5 of us. And she was willing to jump in and assist in any way that she could. So to help us accomplish any of our goals. Sometimes the assist was small. Phone support when you walked out of a final you weren't sure about. More recently, out of a work meeting that I didn't really know what I was doing. Or sometimes it was just making sure that there were Oreos in her house in case we needed that with our coffee. She also showed up to what mattered to each of us, whether that was attending sporting events, musical performances, all of our graduations, award ceremonies, and that transitioned into the workplace. And so I will be forever grateful for the time when she came up to Boston. When I was in college my sophomore year, I was dealing with what most people are dealing with during a transition, right? Roommate issues, growing up. College is different than high school. And she spent a week taking care of me the best way that she knew how. Homemade vegetable soup. She still wouldn't give me the recipe for it.
We don't have it.
We don't, but she knew how to do it. Downy fresh laundry, and of course a couple of shopping trips mixed in. It's not the only time that she made the trip to Boston with the goal of helping me get through a big life change, but it was the first. And it reminded me that a Nana Day really can solve most of my problems. Which is probably why every time I came home back to Pennsylvania from college in Boston, my first stop was to go see her. Walking into our apartment, you were hit immediately with the scent of Downy. And as you're yelling into her apartment, "Hey, woman," and proceeded to tell her everything that's new and exciting in my life, like she didn't spend the last 3 hours on the phone as I was driving home with me telling her kind of the same thing. My Nana passed in December of 2024, and my mom and I are here today to share our journey through caregiving, through the grief process in our first year, and we're here to talk about all of the emotions and everything that comes with that.
And hopefully to help people who are listening, it's a hard time. Nana, my mom, Carol H. Armstrong, is definitely the inspiration for this. It was a tough journey as she maneuvered through caregiving and her restrictive lung disease. She also had a lot of spine and neck problems and left her with a drop foot and limited mobility. I spent my life as an elder law and estate planning attorney. Cortney knows as her mom. And basically, I help families every day answer these questions of, what happens if you die? What do you have to do today to get all your stuff ready? And what happens if you get sick? How do you get the best care? How do you pay for it? And when I was forced to do that with my mom, it was really hard. And as Cortney knows, it was really beautiful at times. I'm happy to be here with my daughter, Cortney Steinbacher, launching this podcast in hopes that we can help other people.
So like my mom said, my name is Cortney, and I'm a CPA, and I work for an elder law firm in North Central Pennsylvania. Coincidentally or not, the firm that my mom's a managing partner at. And I grew up, growing up with an elder law attorney for a mom, you really feel like you're prepared in a way that most people aren't for what's about to happen, right? You talk about these things at the dinner table. Death and dying isn't like a taboo subject.
It's a professional hazard. Yeah.
It really is. And so you also feel like, like what's happening and, but to be prepared for it on an intellectual level and then to actually see it happen really are two different things. And I was the out of town kid. So for those of you that are listening and you are the out of town kid, right? You come home with all these great ideas, but you're not in the day to day. But I still felt connected. Like I still called my nan 3 or 4 times a day. Honestly, if I went more than 2 or 3, she'd call and she'd be calling in the National Guard, putting my face on a milk carton. She's very concerned.
Assuming you were in a ditch.
Yeah.
Because I got that call. Or
that I, ended up walking the dog and like fell into the harbor and nobody found me, right? So she was very concerned if she didn't hear from me often. But it's hard, you're not there. And so there is some wondering about like, could things have been done differently? Should I have been more helpful with not being there? So, everybody thinks that the person that's the hardest because they're in and day out. It's just different. I don't think anything being there, not being there, I don't think either is harder than the other. It's just so different. And you think back and, I made very specific decisions in my life about traveling and making sure that I got home to go see her. And sometimes, I live 15 minutes from the Boston airport. So sometimes that meant driving 7 hours to North Central Pennsylvania and then driving 3.5 hours to take a very similar flight that I could have taken, from the airport that I could see from my apartment.
And I think for those, listening, I think, Cortney does go back and forth of, not being there. And yet very strongly, she was there for me. So, and I think that's important when we think about caregiving. I was on the front lines and sometimes it was hard, but I could call her, and she could pick me back up and I could go back in and, for everybody that's listening, this is so hard because, I was raising kids. I had a job. I have, other family, other commitments. And yet through it all, we had to make sure that she got what she needed and, sometimes demanded, which, is, very much her personality. We dedicate this podcast absolutely to her, her legacy and everything she taught us, which in fact, maybe she taught us how to care for her. But in order to really do this, for people to really understand all of this, we have to introduce her to the people that are listening. She was a complicated little woman.
She was. She really was. And she definitely, all through her life, demanded for, and in some ways that made the caregiving easier, more difficult. There definitely was the range of emotions, which is why, on this podcast, sometimes you look back and you think, gosh, she really did just say that.
Yeah. And the name of the podcast, Hey Woman, is, we don't even know how that started. We think maybe my brother, who also is very much a part of this journey, we think maybe he was the person who said, hey, woman, and almost in a joking manner because her spouse, called her lady. But what we do know is that it stuck. And what we do know is that, like you were saying, Court, when you would come home and walk into her apartment that was like part of a personal care home, we all would walk in and say, hey, woman. And we know that that was what she, favored the most.
Well, let's be honest. She favored the most when DJ, my brother, would come in. So we always did it, but he didn't always. And so in high school, when he started working there and he would deliver her ice cream. So she was supposed to get one snack. I don't know about you, but anytime I'd look in the freezer, there was at least 10 deep in her chocolate ice cream.
It was, yeah.
And so I don't know if it was the ice cream delivery or the fact that DJ would come in and say, hey, woman, that was her favorite. But she always laughed when he would call her that. That's also how we'd call her on the phone. I can think of, as a, millennial, I don't love leaving voicemails, but that's one voicemail I probably could still, recite, like, "Hey woman, it's me. Give me a call back. Love
and,
you."
and she would decide, since you and I and Stephanie all kind of sound the same, she would kind of pick which of us she wanted to call back.
Well, and it's funny because I think she did know which one, because she'd call me back and she'd be like, "I think your sister called me." And I was like, "Well, then why did you call me back?" Right?
It's
So
funny.
she was like trying to get the information before she called the right person back.
Yeah, and this podcast is really, in some ways, about those phone calls, and hoping that for those people who are listening, you can have a phone call with us, and really understanding. And for some of it, we're going to be moving through our own grieving process. But what we hope in that is it helps people that are in the middle of whether you're still caregiving, and caregiving for an aging parent, caregiving for children. Certainly, we're going to get into, and I'm sure Cortney's going to poke a lot of fun at me, but, married, raised 3 kids while building a law firm. So the whole idea of how do you balance all of that? And especially when, the caregiving comes in, and how do you adjust to that new normal? And so I think it's really important, we're going to share with you, what it means to caregive or grieve as a daughter and a granddaughter, and really, really hope that that's a phone call for you.
And I think for me, one of the things that we've missed the most in these, couple of months since she's passed is, I still grab my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to stop myself, or I'll get in the car. And it's not like people talk about like grief, as a roller coaster and all of this different stuff. It's not necessarily the big things. It's the fact that on a Sunday morning, I don't like going grocery shopping by myself. And so I'd
Mm-hmm.
call her and she'd talk to me, and, or like when I'm walking the dog and and if I'd stop and get a coffee, oh gosh, she did not like that because she can hear me ordering, right? So now, thank goodness, they have the touchpad so she doesn't know that I'm ordering a coffee.
Well, I mean, it's not the best manners to be on the phone while
That's
you're
true.
ordering something, and that's not something that would be okay with her.
Nope, you had to hang up the phone and then recall her back. And she would wait
Yeah.
until you did. But it really is, you find the mundane, or a couple weeks ago I was cleaning out my closet. It's easy. You take all the stuff out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, shit, I gotta get it all back in there. And it comes out a lot easier than it goes back in. And so it's kind of at that moment where I would have called her and she would have told me, she's like, wow, maybe we shouldn't have started this so late on a Saturday. Or maybe you shouldn't have sat down and called me. Maybe you should have just kept moving, because that would have been easier. And so while her advice didn't always come with like the care or the grace that I would have needed in that moment for the mistake that the small mistake I made, she was right. She was right. Maybe I shouldn't have, because once you sit down, you're kind of done.
One of my probably favorite memories, or something that will just stay with me, is in her last week. She was pretty bad, and we all were around her and stayed with her at night. And for many months, I had slept on a couch beside her hospital bed. And but one night, she was just, and she had very limited mobility at this point in time. Like, she couldn't get out of bed by herself. But I'd see her there just like trying to get out of bed. And I had to say to her, like, Mom, what are you doing? Like, it's 2 a.m, And she's like, it's time to get up and get going.
Yeah.
So when you were just telling that story about like cleaning out your closet, like, it's like, well, just keep doing,
Yeah.
And that was like who she was through and through. That she just, it's time to get up. I might as well. I'm laying here. I might as well get going. And even with the ravages of the restrictive lung disease and her neck and spine issues, she was who she was. And I think in caregiving, sometimes we fight who people are, because all of us have our idiosyncrasies. And I think for me, leaning into those idiosyncrasies and appreciating that that's who she was as a person really let me not feel such a burden of the caregiving, but really let me just enjoy the moment I was in. And that's why, I said the moments, it was both hard, but at times it was absolutely beautiful. And that's one of those moments. That's one of those moments. It's 2 a.m. and she is trying to get herself out of bed, and there is no way she's going to get herself out of bed. But for her, she might as well get up and get something done, And, I grew up on a farm, and she very much was, you get up and you get working. Like,
Yep.
you're not sitting down doing nothing, but that, and whether you agree with that, the point is it was who she was. And I think that, for anybody that's listening that's kind of going through this, I guess that's be one of my wishes for you. If you're feeling overwhelmed and burdened by it, lean into it. Lean into those idiosyncrasies. It's funny, I'm doing this podcast and you mentioned about the elbows, and I can't possibly put my elbows on the table. But what is it that those things helped us? And so instead of fighting, I know even like we think about, gosh, how do you have the time? All of a sudden you have this busy life, and how do you have the time? And I think, I remember early on, this was, probably 6 years ago, when she had, we had all these mobility problems. This was before even the restrictive lung disease was such a big component. We had this time where she had to go to the doctor all the time, like once a week. My brother and I, and my brother was very much a part of her caregiving, and very much somebody that I could rely on to help in all of it. There were so many people in our family, my husband, all the grandkids, but
Well, Dad was her favorite. Nobody backed in the car better than Dad did. So my dad has a CDL and is used to driving these trucks, and she has just this little car, and he drives perfectly. And I don't know about you, but she made sure to let me know.
Yeah.
I was always 5 minutes late, driving just probably a little bit too fast to get to the doctor's appointment. Dad backed in perfectly. Everything was calm, cool, collected. I always came in a little bit more like, woman, like, we got to get going. Like, she's like standing outside waiting for me because she wants to be there 30 minutes earlier than you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in those times, it was like every week. And, sometimes the grandkids were around, and sometimes they were in college and they weren't. And so, Buddy and I, but I mean, the point from some ways is that, and I hate to use the word a new normal, but I think if you're in the middle of caregiving and you're feeling overwhelmed, you got to just sit down and understand this is going to happen. Like, I had to just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to end up having to take off a day a week or a day every other week and get her to these doctors until we figure out like what's going on. And it's a lot easier to maneuver if you just accept that that's true. And I know many people listening, that's really hard. How do you do that with your job? And how do you do everything else you're already supposed to do? But I think you just understanding that's where you're at, or that you have to get somebody else to do it, that you can't do it. But don't keep trying to do it and feeling like you're failing or that you're overwhelming and that there's just too much. You really have to think about what is it that needs to be done? What are the options? And really, have the courage to figure out what those options were. For me, it was that my brother and I were able to we both have jobs that were flexible enough that we were able to. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not an impact. Like,
Right.
Please know, that doesn't mean, sometimes my brother was leaving his house at 5 a.m. so he could go do what he needed to do to get back by like 1 or 2 to take her to the doctor. It's not that there wasn't an impact, but we did have the flexibility. Not everybody does. And, the statistics out there about just how hard this is for people that have to do this, that people who take demotions in their jobs, people who for the first time in their careers, are written up. Caregiving has a toll. And I think we have to just say that. That doesn't mean that it's not what we want to do. It doesn't mean that I would trade for anything, those things. But it definitely does. And again, for people who are listening, my wish for you is that you would really just accept that it might be too much. Something might have to go. You may have to tag somebody else in. For my brother and I, we were always really lucky because there was always some grandkids coming home that we were able to tag in. And yeah, as Cortney pointed out, sometimes that was what she wanted anyway. She did have her favorites. My husband, DJ,
Oh,
were
yes,
definitely,
DJ.
yeah, the only grandson, definitely was a good driver. You and I were very much similar that like, come on, let's go. We got to get going. And that was really not her preference. But
Well, and I think DJ, coming home, he would come home on breaks. And so it's so different to come home on a college break. And he really has the day. So all of a sudden, like, she gets to go from going to the doctor, which it was all you and I could do to get her to the doctor, to like, well, now she's stopping for ice cream.
yeah.
And now she gets to stop at Tony's, her favorite deli, and pick some stuff up, or DJ gets to take her out to lunch. And so some of that too is, once she was out, it was kind of like once you get up for the day, you're up. Once you're out of the house, we lived in north central Pennsylvania. It's a very rural area. It took 20 minutes to get to town. So you only went to town once.
Right.
Right. Like we're in New York City right now. It's not like just going down the street to the convenience store. You had to really kind of commit to going downtown. And so, I mean, for her, like, she knew, like, I think also, too, not feeling bad that every time she can't do those things, but even if that was her preference, that every time she had a Tony's order, that sometimes she didn't tell you about, that she had called in and prepaid for until you were leaving the doctor's appointment.
Yeah. Sometimes you didn't have time to do the little errands, but you were doing them anyways because they were already called in. So, like, what were you going to do? Absolutely. Well, I think, too, in part of what this podcast was started out with was really part of Cortney's eulogy at her grandmother's funeral. And, in that, she had at the end of that eulogy a few things that we learned from her. And in this episode, we want to share those things and what they mean. So the first is to move purposely through life, but never leave dust. And I don't know, Court, if you want to kind of share like what that kind of means to you.
So I think it means a couple of different things. I mean, one, we are actually talking about dust. Like this was an old house that was built in the Civil War, and there was glass everywhere. Those hurricane chandeliers, the Hummels. Oh my God, would you, like when you had to dust the Hummels, like that was horrendous. So you learn to move very purposefully, to not leave dust, to not, so you walked slowly, like you didn't like, raise things up. But it also, like, she was very intentional about what she did, and she was always moving forward. And I think that's something that, moving purposefully through life and never leaving dust settles because things aren't moving.
Yeah.
And so for her, like, as long as you were taking the next step forward, and she was always there for us when we were trying to take that next step forward. Without her, I never would have passed the CPA exam. She was on the phone with me every time after I got off of one. And if anybody's taken them, you don't walk out of them feeling good. That is a 4-hour exam about complex stuff that nobody needs to know, except those of us that do it for a living. And even then, I don't know that I needed to know all of it. And so, she was always there to help us, make sure that we were moving forward and doing what we needed to do.
When I think also, you shared this as part of the eulogy, and it's interesting to me that being the person that she raised, so being her daughter, it also has this like very, very deep meaning for me about leaving dust. And it is what you're talking about. But, she really fundamentally raised me that, and please know this comes out of, kind of a Christian faith, but I think it's applicable. But she really raised us that like you shouldn't take more from this world than what you need. So like overeating, over drinking, that was a sin. And to me, that kind of ties together with this, like, never leaving dust is like not taking more, but also very much she always cleaned things up. Like she always left something better than what she had started. And I think for me that when you read that and I thought about it afterwards, I think that to me has that meaning that, it's also like you leave this world better than what you started it. And so I think that's important for all of us to really think about, and not just in the caregiving, but just in life in general,
Well, it's like, we were allowed to play with one toy at a time. So we could have whatever toys we wanted, but you played with one at a time. And so when you got the Lincoln Logs out, you cleaned up the Lincoln Logs before you got the next set of blocks out.
Yeah.
Or, gosh, I'll never forget, she has a sister who lives in Texas, and they would always come up every year for the summer, and cousins around my age and then around my sister Stephanie's age. And they had a separate, so this is like these VHS tapes, like they had a separate rewinder. Well, Nan didn't. You just sat there and waited for it to get rewound. But my God, you weren't watching that next movie until like it rewound, and that's how you put it away. You always leave things better than you found it. And so I remember my Aunt Bibi suggesting to Nan that she get a rewinder, and Nan very forcefully told her, my kids can wait. So like we're just like sitting there on the couch, like we can wait, right? Like, and now the days of Netflix, which Nan thought was fantastic, you don't have to wait for things to get rewound. But I remember being a little kid and Aunt Bibi said that, and I was like, oh my God, like we don't say that.
No, not at all. So the second thing that you shared, a lesson from her is remember to be informed in the world. A weather report should dictate your day. But boy, being informed in the world, there's no time where I think that's more important than right now, being informed. And she definitely was somebody who was very informed about politics and what was happening in this world, and really felt, an obligation to read the newspaper or watch, those reports. But also, growing up on a farm, it was always like, can we cut the hay when I was a kid? What's the weather looking like? And it's funny, as I raised my children and, Court, you would go to your Nana's. Didn't matter if you were 3 years old, you came home and told me the weather report. Like, I knew what it was. And sometimes she would ask me, well, what's the weather? And I'm like, I don't know.
That was not an okay answer, by the way.
No, it's not an okay answer. But I think that there's a lesson in there. And again, when we take this back and think about how does this go with caregiving, these were things that were important to her, and things that, if I was going in and she was really having a bad day, I could go back to something like this. I could talk to her about the weather. And that may not be for your loved one something you would talk about, but for her, it's something that you could dive into a long conversation that she enjoyed. And it's something that she kept with her, as she declined, I would go in and see her, and I would see that she had watched, some news that day, and she would have notes written down. It was really, really important to her. Who said what? How did they say it? And that even goes back, 6-7 years ago, when I would find these little notes that she had written down. And again, these are her isms, and I think there are some life lessons in them. But also just leaning into the isms, if you will, leaning into those types of things, I think is really, really important. So the next. Retail therapy is the best type of therapy, and she taught us that well.
She did. She taught us how to shop quickly, efficiently, and I think nobody could spend more money and accomplish a to-do list faster than she could. And she definitely taught us to do that. But also, like, for me, some of this was like the way that she connected with me. So I spent my first semester of college in Australia. So I'm the oldest granddaughter, and we were really close. And so for her, like, to think that I was about to go spend 4 months on the other side of the world, she was working at your office at the time. And, technology it was something she was learning to do. And she was learning to email, which was really important. And so she would get these mailing lists from these different designers, and she would send them to me with her critiques of what they were doing. And so, sometimes it is about going out and shopping, and sometimes it's something small, but even like, I'll find myself, if I have a bad day or something, maybe you walk into Sephora and you pick up like one little thing, and, and I do think about her. It was very important to us that we had good makeup and we were taking care of ourselves and different things like that. But sometimes it really was just like browsing online, and thinking about, like, she really thought that, like, some people did not do their spring line well.
call him up and say, Carol Armstrong from Williamsport, Pennsylvania doesn't really think you know what you're doing. And that even continued. It was another way of connecting. Even when she wasn't able to like go shopping anymore, and you would come home and help her buy the Christmas gifts, online, and she loved that you could put it up on, the TV. And she could pick out the things. But, again, something that, just it was a true part of her. And there was times that I thought, oh my goodness, like, why are we buying these things? But then I leaned into the fact that, yeah, she wanted a new pair of sandals. And for her, it was kind of the process of getting the new pair of sandals. And at times I could take her after a doctor's appointment. And then sometimes I didn't have time. And here's where there's a lesson for caregiving. I had to figure out a different way. And so I would, go visit her, and we could spend all evening picking out a pair of sandals. And please know we didn't do this all the time, but she really enjoyed it. And she was able to make this kind of, pivot to buying stuff online and then, waiting for the packages to come. Although after you bought all the Christmas presents online with her and the packages would come, then I'd have to figure out which package went to who.
Well, and sometimes it didn't matter to her who we bought the things for. When they came, sometimes on Christmas Eve, you just had to exchange.
Yes,
like you
that's
just
true.
had to it was really important to her that we all had the same number of gifts. What actually went in those? Some years, my cousin Abby, who is, I don't know, probably 6 or 7 inches shorter than DJ, ended up with some of DJ's pants. And those probably weren't going to fit Ab.
No.
But there was a thought process in her head that, DJ's younger and therefore his size should be smaller. Never mind the fact that Ab is, 6 inches shorter.
And he's a man. He's a boy.
Men's clothes, women's clothes. Yeah, it was. But we always got socks. So, that was always important to her. But I even remember she believed in seasonality in clothing too. So every season you're like, you don't go anywhere. Woman, you haven't, you go to the doctor, but, you don't need new pants just because it's fall. But I, at some point in time, I think through the Christmas ordering, my email got attached to her LL Bean account. And LL Bean is still a place where you can call in an order and they'll ship it to you.
Yeah.
So you can use, most of us use the online website, but she would call in and all of a sudden she's getting 6 pairs of pants. And I'm calling her woman, what are you doing? You don't need 6 pairs of pants. And she's like, well, there's 7 days in a week. And I was like, okay.
Seems like you do need 6 pair of pants. Yeah.
I stand corrected. I've been wearing the same jeans for 3 years, but sure, 6 pairs of pants because the leaves are falling and there's 7 days in a week. That tracks to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, some of these things, I think, in the caregiving and as she was losing her independence, we went back to things that we knew she really liked. And some of it wasn't all her pushing it. It was us kind of grappling with, well, how do we help her? How do we make this okay for her? And for those of you who are caregiving, I think it is really important that it's hard. It's hard for the person that's caregiving, but it's also hard for the person that's losing their independence. And so although some days she could drive me, I also had other days that I could really kind of sit back and actually admire her strength and her needing to do what she needed to do. And I think, retail therapy is it. And, I think for all of us, if you have a bad day, going and walking around a store a little bit, whether you buy something or not, is probably helpful in some ways. So, and that's something that she gave us. So next, and again, for those of you listening, we're going over really 5 life lessons that Cortney included as part of her eulogy to her grandmother. But the 4th one is cleaning, or what Nana, my mom, called putzing around the house really will change your whole outlook on life. Court, if you want to talk about what that means to you.
Yeah, so for me, like, I work in accounting and you spend most of your day behind a computer screen like most of us do,
Hmm.
at work. And so the act of cleaning, it's kind of twofold. One, you get to see that you accomplished something.
Yes.
So, you could be upset and crying and I'm calling her and she's like, "Well, have you scrubbed your bathroom lately?" And I'm just like, I actually haven't. And she didn't mean like with a mop. Like she actually meant like go get a bucket, get on
Hmm.
your hands and knees and scrub the tile in your
Yeah.
bathroom. And so I was like, well, you clean every week, but you don't. So I can't say that I got my toothbrush out and I've scrubbed the grout
Yeah.
recently, which would, be what she's kind of referring to. But it also is the act of getting something physical. Sometimes the body thinks better than the mind.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like her way of connecting that, which is really like you should pay attention. Like sometimes if you get out of it, your body will get you unstuck. And when you're done, you get to see that you accomplished something. And that kind of like starts the trend of like, okay, well, I did this, so now I can do this, so now I can do this. And it can really just like change your whole outlook on what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny. Maybe we should put a disclaimer in here for those of you who, are professionals in mental health. You may think, is something different. But I think for me, it is that twofold thing of very much being able to do something physical. And I don't mean physical in the fact that like I'm, lifting boxes and stuff. I find that I do this. I find that, my job, often I am seated. Often I'm dealing with difficult family issues. And sometimes I just like to be left alone and putz around my house and put things away. And I think it is the twofold of like I'm doing something physical. And like you said, like I'm letting my, body just, do as it wants. But then also there is a sense of accomplishment. Like and it would have to be something that you appreciated that sense of accomplishment. So some people don't appreciate everything being put back together, but I certainly do. I certainly, and that's something that, I was raised with. So, it's upsetting to me if my car is dirty because thank goodness she had a car and we could take her in her car
Oh, yeah.
because if she had gotten into my dirty car.
Well, with Pumbaa, like the dog hair, like you have a lab, like you just can't help it. Like even if
Yeah.
you wanted to keep your car clean, it's.
Well, I do, but yeah, but I think like, just being able to say, okay, if you did scrub your floor and you cleaned your bathroom, being able to step back and look that was completed, is really helpful in some ways. And I suppose for some people who might do more physical work, during the day, you might have something else. And I know, I've been married 30 years to Cortney's dad, and we do spend our days very differently. I am an attorney. I do elder law and estate planning, and so I'm often talking to people, staff, clients, and often I'm in situations at the firm that somebody's upset, to be honest. So a lot of what I do is try to get people on the same page. But my husband, does excavation and demolition, and so he does something, very physical at work. Now he runs machines. Let's not pretend like he's, doing this himself. But it's still up and out of the machines and, looking at the land. And again, I think there's a lesson in there that, and later on we'll get into this in the podcast that, he cared for his dad who had dementia for 14 years. And his way of dealing with all of that is very different than my way. And some of that has to do with who we are as people. But some of it I also think goes back to this exact conversation, which is, how do you spend your days and how do you unwind that? And it's interesting, he doesn't talk to people while he's working.
Well, he's in the equipment by himself, so he's very much more social on a Friday afternoon than you and I are. Like
Right.
I could spend a great weekend not talking to anybody and just scrubbing my bathroom.
I know. But that wouldn't be okay for him. And
No.
it certainly wouldn't help him with the stress of caregiving. And again, I share this with people because we have to understand that whenever you're caregiving, it's more than you. There's a family that's involved in all of that. And there could be your spouse, your children, extended family, siblings, and they may deal with it differently. Like if I said to my husband, why don't you go do something physical to make you feel better? That's probably not going to be helpful to him.
No.
But so I think, whatever it is, the idea is that for us, that can change our whole outlook. So cleaning or putzing can change our whole outlook. And if you're listening to this and saying, no way, that's not me, I think you have to figure out what it is for you. What it is. And I know, like, for my husband, it is going and doing, like, he would, goodness forbid that he calls his sister. He gets in a car and goes and sees her.
Well, you can't have a beer on the phone.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he says. I can't even, I won't even call her. Like, I'm texting him. And he's just driving up there to see what she's doing.
Yeah, but that I've seen him do that, and that changes his whole outlook. Because to him, it's that interacting, it's the talking. And so, I think being aware of what it is for you is so important. And then somehow figuring that out, getting that in your life. I think too many people, when they're caregiving, they sacrifice themselves so much, and sometimes needlessly, because they don't even take the time to think about, what do I need? And we're talking about simple things here. Like, anybody can scrub their floor, right? Anybody can say, I've had enough. I just need to go out and go to dinner, have a pizza. And even if, money's an issue with that, packing a picnic and, going outside, what makes you grounded. And I think, there's so many elements that some people also think, forget how helpful they are. So for me, being by water is really helpful. And so, we do have a lake house, but before we had a lake house, just, going to a local stream, in north central Pennsylvania, there's a lot of water. And so that's not hard. But I can remember even being part of a group of women, and even something like taking off your shoes and just putting your feet in the grass.
Yeah.
Really grounds you and is helpful. So, the idea of it is, she may have said cleaning or putzing changes your whole outlook. But for those of you listening, what we want to really think about is, what is it for you? What changes that outlook for you? All right, finally, it's okay to take a day, watch a movie, drink a ginger ale, and have a snack from Tony's. And Tony's is a delicatessen in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and it was by far one of her favorite places throughout my life. I can't really think of a pre-Tony's time.
No. They were dark times if they were. I think maybe we blocked it out. And Tony's really had anything, deli meat, spreads. She always got her ham for Christmas, always had to come from Tony's.
She often was really upset at me that I didn't order mine soon enough. That's definitely a difference between her and I. She probably ordered hers the day after Thanksgiving, yes. And I probably, if Tony said you have to order it by the 16th, I probably ordered it the 15th or the 16th. That was upsetting to her.
Because they could run out. We could be out of hams.
They could, and there wouldn't be any other place to get one.
Nope.
Yeah, no. But I think that, the concept of it, it's okay to take a day. Watch a movie, drink a ginger ale, have a snack. It's funny. I'll never forget when you were not old enough to do this. You were, I don't know, about 3 years old, 3 or 4. And we're at the house, and Donald and I, your dad and I and you, and I was in a mood. I was cleaning. We were getting stuff, I'd worked all week. We were cleaning and, getting all this stuff out. And all of a sudden, my mom's, Nana, her car comes in the driveway, and I'm thinking, what is she doing here? She got out of her car, and she came over, and she was laughing. She's picking you up. You called her and said, I need a Nana day. Because you were not down with all of our cleaning and the mood that I was in.
The first but not the last time I called in Nan to save me, probably.
Absolutely. So, that idea, I think, for all the grandkids, she created a safe space. She created a place where you could have that, Nana day, watch a movie, and time kind of stood still. Uh,
It did. I mean, kind of now it's a little bit more like acceptable, I think, to take like a flow day or people like a mental health day. That's really
right.
what they were. And so, in high school, we would take one and you would just like go out. And I remember like you had to, if you were there early in the morning, because we didn't always like plan them necessarily, and she had this alarm on her house, so there was a trick to, you had to get in the house, shut off the alarm, and like sprint up the stairs before, because like I don't know why we didn't just call her, but
I
we
don't
didn't.
know.
We
I don't
didn't. We didn't. This is what we did. We
know.
didn't want to like wake her up, but like the alarm going off felt fine. And so you're coming in from the garage, and so the garage door wouldn't turn off the alarm, and then you're walking in the house and you're turning off the alarm and you're sprinting up the stairs and you're like, woman, it's me, it's me, it's me. And then you like she's like standing there like, I don't know, like ready to go get her bat to be like, oh my God, like there's an intruder in the house. And then you just like crawled back into bed and you just
Yeah.
like, went back to sleep, and she'd, make food, or you'd watch movies. And sometimes I think, I even did homework a little bit, but it was kind of just like the thought that like whatever happened that day, like life would be there the next day. And I think, sometimes like you're so busy, like, we
Hmm.
work, and if you're caregiving, and then even if you're not, just like life in general is a lot. And so making sure that you're taking a day, and it's not, I think for us, like it wasn't a weekend day. Like you
Hmm.
took a Wednesday
Yeah.
and you just took the day. And so like you can't always do that, but thinking about like if you could, like do you have sick days? Like because mental health is just as important as like a physical ailment. And so using one of them for something like that, where you just do what you want to. Maybe you get up and you get a coffee and you go to a yoga class, or
Hmm.
maybe you just use it to be grounded in what's going on around you. But these days where it was kind of okay to just do anything or do nothing, and it wasn't, a Saturday's not necessarily a flow day, right?
Right.
Because it's like, that's your weekend anyway. So it was kind of like a day that you just plucked out of real life and did whatever you wanted.
Yeah, and I think for people that are listening, of course, we're talking about um, created last minute days that are kind of maybe emergency days. But I think also just thinking about if you're caregiving or just life's a little bit too much, it's okay to plan a day,
Yeah.
plan a flow day. Where I know with me, so much of my life was what I had to do. And I'm sure there's moms out there listening, whether you're a mom, a daughter, uh, you know, a a son, a father, but so much of our lives are like dictated, at my office. I live by my calendar, and I'm very disciplined to come in and say, okay, whatever's on my calendar, I'm going to do. And I have to do that. I have to do that. And then when caregiving, or whether that's for a child or an aging parent comes in or a grandparent comes in, it's kind of upsetting that whole apple cart that's already really really busy. And I think when that happens, it's really good to pick a day and just decide that that's going to be your kind of Nana day, if you will. You could rent a hotel room and sit in there and watch, your movies. Or for those of you out there who, have loved ones, can you create a Nana day for them? And again, this isn't about going to like a high price spa, which there's nothing wrong with
No,
that.
I mean, if you wanted to do that, she would 100% be behind us when
Yeah,
we decided to.
absolutely. But we don't want to say, but this is really just about, creating that space for yourself, for the people that you love, based on whatever you're going through. Um, and sometimes just, having your own time, and, not doing what's on the calendar, but what you feel like doing. And if that's nothing, that's okay. If that's binge watching, Netflix, that's also okay. And I think it's so important for people to hear, because I think too many times they feel bad about that.
Yeah.
and they have this negative self-talk that somehow that they needed that, or they didn't get anything done, and then they feel bad. I know my daughter Stephanie will often say to me, well, I just didn't do anything and I feel bad. It's like, well, no, I think your body, and this is something mom would say, this is something Nana would say, your body's telling you
Right.
what you need. And so listen to it. And so, yeah, definitely something that we want to be thinking about, which is it's okay to take a day, watch a movie, drink a ginger ale. I mean, it has to be a certain type of ginger ale. But
Oh yeah. No, she always bought very specific kinds, and it had to be in the bottle. No, none of
yes,
the cans.
yes, yes, yes. And get your snack. So, well, I really hope, listening to this, our first episode, has helped you understand that, we're here to share with you our journey about a beautiful woman, my mom, Carol Armstrong, who was Cortney's Nana, who we lovingly called Hey Woman. And we hope to weave through both our relationship as a mother-daughter in really kind of fast-paced careers, but also how we caregived. And we'll touch on topics of, raising children and being a granddaughter and just what life comes at us. Caregiving in this country is really hard. And we'll also add, our professional take on all of this. As an elder law and estate planning attorney, I will be talking to you about things that I think are important for people to do. But also, my background is also in social work, and so we'll have that type of a tint to it. And of course, Cortney brings to the table being a CPA, and how does that, apply in these situations, both for what she does for work, but also in getting to that point, going to college and having that type of a job, and then trying to caregive on top of that and make time for that. But Gord, do you want to tell our listeners how they what next steps they have that we would ask them for?
Yeah, so definitely we want you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. We also have a website, the Planning and Protecting site, so planningandprotecting.com. This is a great resource if you are a caregiver and you're looking for an elder law and estate planning attorney in your area. If you are an elder law and estate planning attorney, it's also a great resource. There's all kinds of free downloads. There's great information. It's also the best way to get in touch with us and our team. And then you can follow us on social media. So the @Hey Woman Podcasts on Instagram, TikTok. These will also be uploaded to YouTube. Feel free to leave us a review. So we do hope that, kind of as my mom said, we hope to go through it. We're also really going to probably run the full gamut of emotions here. So it's okay to laugh. It's okay that this is a roller coaster and there's no one right way to feel. So we have tissues back here in case we needed them. We didn't. We made it through without. But we can't always make that promise. And it's okay to laugh, to be angry, to be sad. And so we
and I just have to add, and to be honest, about the ups and downs. Yeah.
And so we really appreciate you guys listening in, and we hope to see you in the next episode.
Yeah, we look forward to having you listen on with us and create this journey in our future episodes.